Hello and welcome to Chatty AF, the anime feminist podcast. I'm Dee Hogan, the managing editor at AniFem. I also run the anime blog The Josei Next Door, and you can find me on Twitter at Josei Next Door. I'm joined today by Caitlin and Miranda, if you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I am an editor and a writer for Anime Feminist, as well as having my own blog. I have a heroin problem, heroin with an E. Always have to add that. And I also have started contributing regularly to the Daily Dot, writing about anime there. And you can find me on Twitter at altsoon_no-dere.
Hi, and then I'm Miranda Sanchez. Back on to be a guest. Very excited. I'm a senior editor at IGN, and I kind of run a lot of our anime content. I like to say I only run the good stuff, because some things happen without me knowing, and that's fine. But yeah, so I'm very happy to be back and chatting about some good anime.
Yeah, and today we are going to be talking about the Little Witch Academia anime television series. It's a show that a lot of our readers have asked us to kind of talk about or give our opinions on, but because it ran on Netflix and we didn't get it until it was all kind of dumped on us at once, the timing just never really worked out for us to have a podcast about it. We weren't able to do them for our season check-ins or anything like that. Thankfully, Caitlin and I sort of independently and accidentally ended up finishing it at about the same time, and we thought, hey, let's do a podcast while it's fresh in our memories. And I had been listening to the Kill the Kill podcast, which Miranda had joined us on, and was a very good sport about. One of your favorite shows, and Vry was lukewarm on it, and Amelia did not care for it. But at the end of it, I heard you talking about how much you enjoyed Little Witch Academia, and I was like, we should thank Miranda for being such a good sport, and bring her back to talk about a show that's a little bit easier to discuss from a feminist perspective, more positives, I think, to this one. I like to call Little Witch Academia "What If Trigger," but without the bullshit. And
That's dream, right?
Yeah. No, it's great. I think most of this podcast will be us speaking pretty glowingly about it, because I think all three of us are pretty pleased with the show itself. Which actually is a good segue for us to kind of just talk about our own personal history with this series. Miranda, you're our guest. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So one of my friends who's from Australia visited and said, hey, Miranda, there's one anime you really need to watch. It's called Little Witch Academia. It's just an OVA right now, but you should watch it. And I said, okay. And then I waited 2 years and then watched it, and I was in love immediately. Magical realism is like one of my favorite things. So like the Ancient Magus Bride is like just straight up my alley. And so then finding this was just something like so awesome. And then I heard about the sequel OVA, and then I watched the Netflix series when it came out. So it's very good.
Great. And Caitlin, you finished this one pretty recently, like I did, correct?
Yes. It's been on my radar for a really long time, because I did have friends who watched it when the OAVs first came out, and they drew fan art and talked about it a lot, and I was like, that sounds cool, and then I never got around to watching it. And then one day I was about to be on a fairly long flight, a cross-country flight, and I was like, you know what would be really good to watch? Little Witch Academia. So I watched the OAVs then, and then one time my friend and I decided we were going to watch all of the gay anime available streaming.
Okay, a noble goal.
My friend chose Little Witch Academia because she's like, well, I don't know if it's actually gay, but I know that the shipping is very strong. And we watched that for a while, got sidetracked, and then when I started writing for the Daily Dot, the editor was like, hey, like, would you like to write sort of a beginner's guide to Little Witch Academia, since you said that you've watched some of it? And I'm like, yes. So then I just kind of slammed the rest of the series around when Dee was watching it herself.
Yeah, I saw the OVAs around about when they came out. I had a friend who told me about them, kind of like Miranda did, and brought them over, and so we watched them together. And I enjoyed them. I thought they were fun, but it wasn't anything I got really excited about. So when the TV series came out, I was looking forward to it, and then Netflix was like, well, we have it, so who knows when you'll ever get to watch it. And it wound up on my queue, but again, I got sidetracked with other new shows coming out and wasn't able to get to it right away. I checked out the first few episodes a few months back, so like 6 months ago probably at this point, and so my memory on those is probably going to be a little bit fuzzy today. I liked it, but it was very episodic, so it wasn't something that I felt like I had to keep coming back to quickly. So I got distracted by a couple other things, and then finally had some time to go back to it again, and the second act is a lot more plot focused, and I just binged it. I got completely caught up in the story and the characters and had a really good time with it through to the end. So, yeah, just wrapped it up a few weeks ago at this point.
So it's definitely far more fresh for both of you than for me, but
It's a memorable series,
Oh,
I think,
for sure.
especially in terms of the kind of the overarching ideas, and the characters are very they stand out. So I think we'll be all right there.
yeah.
I did this a little bit backwards, but it just kind of worked out this way. We should probably provide a little bit of an overview about Little Witch Academia itself. Caitlin, did you want to go ahead and tackle that?
Sure. So yeah, this is a very, very basic sort of overview. So the first OAV of Little Witch Academia was was made when Studio Trigger had just broken off of Studio Gainax. Brand new studio, sort of made as a way to help train some of the new animators that were coming in. And it totally blew up on YouTube and Nico Doga, the Japanese equivalent of YouTube. People loved it, and so then they decided they were going to kickstart a second OAV. The Kickstarter was a wild success. They actually managed to use the momentum from that Kickstarter to double the length. And that was it for a while. And then they had Susie and Akko made cameo appearances in Space Patrol Luluco, and at the end of Luluco they were like, hey, we're going to make more Little Witch Academia. Everyone was like, yay! And then the rest is history.
Yeah, such like a great way to kick that off too, because Space Patrol Luluco was like such a very much let's celebrate everything Trigger has done up until this point, and then finishing it off with something that people loved from Trigger that was so different from what we usually expect from Trigger, especially. It's just like such a nice, rewarding thing to find at the end there. And wow, like I was looking at the wiki for this too, and it came out in the original short came out in 2013. It's kind of crazy how long it's been.
It has been a while, yeah.
I don't like talking about the passage of time.
No, that's totally
so
fair.
Scary. So yeah, and the TV series, just kind of for folks at home who are wondering, we're not really going to be covering the OVAs. I don't think any of us have seen those in a very long time, and
It's been a hot minute.
Are, yeah, and they kind of exist in their own canon. The characters, my memory of it is the characters are a little bit different, and it's not super clear on where they're placed within the TV series itself. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
do you
so
think?
like the TV or the anime series, the full one, is more focused and kind of refreshes all these characters. Like while they have a lot of the same traits as they did in the OVAs, for instance, Diana's a lot less antagonistic. Like she's just kind of doing her own thing in the TV series, where in the anime or the OVAs, she was more so like queen of the mean girls. And
she was more the Malfoy to Akko's Harry Potter.
Yeah. So like, and then in the full series, she's still kind of the queen of two very not great ladies, but isn't perpetuating their behavior. They just kind of do that without her, like, I guess, direction. Whereas in the OVAs, she does more of that.
Right.
So there's like a lot of different things. And a lot of people ask, should I watch those first? I think yes, because it's just nice to have that extra context for this world and to see them in like their original forms in a way, and because they're both available, and then watch the full series.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not like necessary. It's not something like you should feel the need to do, but it's not something you should avoid. It's just sort of like, why not?
Yeah,
they're cute. They exist,
and both very good.
Yeah. But for the purposes of this retrospective, we will be focusing just on the TV series and kind of what went down in that, just to let folks know. Which kind of gets us into talking just sort of overarching about the show itself. One of the things that struck me about it, so I kind of thought I would lead with this, is what genre would you call Little Witch Academia? Because a lot of the time we approach anime from the sense of, oh, it's a shonen, oh, it's a shoujo, oh, it's a sci-fi, it's this, it's that. What do you guys think of, what do you think Little Witch Academia is? How would you categorize it?
I would call it, in terms of like the shonen, shoujo, etc., demographic breakdown, I would call it, and I know that this is an oxymoron, shonen for girls. I mean, not for girls, but like
targeted at girls.
Yeah,
is that kind of what you mean?
Or like, yeah, well, yeah,
yeah, because obviously boys can enjoy it too, and people of any genders, because it's a very nice show. But
it is.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. In terms of its structure, in terms of its themes, in terms of its character dynamics, it is very, very, very shonen. It has more in common with series like, I mean, Harry Potter is the obvious one, but also series like Naruto or like what are some?
Well,
other...
I'd say the structure is pretty close to My Hero Academia, especially with kind of the outsider character who's a little bit behind with everybody else as far as their powers go.
Absolutely.
Working through it with determination and hard work, which are very kind of shonen.
Yeah, then having
qualities.
That mentor there to kind of guide them through their adventure.
Right. Exactly. Like, well, to go back to that same comparison, Akko, personality-wise, bears a lot more resemblance to Naruto than pretty much any other character that I can think of, personality-wise. Very brash, kind of overconfident, picking fights with the top student when she's nowhere near their ability level.
And just like incredibly determined, for sure.
Yeah, and just very determined. The way that I put it in my Daily Dot article was the source of her power is stubbornness.
I think that's fair. Well, and I think Little Witch Academia, there is a large focus on self-confidence, and I think that's something you see in a lot of in shoujo, like in stories targeted for girls, but it tends to be more about the character not really having any self-confidence and then sort of needing to build to that. Right. Whereas in Little Witch, Akko just starts off like overflowing with maybe unearned self-confidence at times. But that is part of her. I mean, it causes her some problems, but it's also part of her strength, is that she is just so determined, and she has moments where she doubts herself or gets discouraged, but she still picks herself back up and kind of keeps running forward. I agree with you. I think it has a lot of shonen elements. I also kind of keep seeing it as sort of a magical girl series.
Yeah.
Because I think there's very much that focus on friendship and, emotions really driving a lot of the changes. Like the whole thing with the shiny rod and unlocking the powers is like you have to feel the words. You can't just say them. So it's not just about like learning a new technique. It's also about
discovering a lesson.
Because feelings.
And evolving yourself as you discover and understand new things about the world and yourself and relationships.
Yeah, and so one of the things I really enjoyed about it was the way it kind of blended these two genres that a lot of the time we think of as being like quote unquote for girls and for boys, and merging them together and kind of blurring the boundaries. And I like seeing shows where those demographic lines get played with a lot, and I think we're seeing that more and more, where it's becoming, we're saying something is a shonen or a shoujo is meaning less and less over the years, I think. And I think Little Witch is very much a series that wants to challenge those supposed constraints, I guess.
I agree. And it's interesting because I feel like most of the time when you have guys that are taking something, a genre that is sort of traditionally aimed at girls, and whether or not they're like, oh, we're going to make this for grown men, or whether or not they're going to make this for boys, like they do tend to add like certain unsavory elements, whether or not
fan service, especially.
Fan service, like whether like, it doesn't have to be like an all out torture porn gore fest, like Magical Girl site, or, like, I'm not here for the Madoka discourse. But, like, it doesn't.
That is a direction that a lot of male writers have taken the magical girl genre, especially in recent years.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So like,
I think it helps that this was written by a woman, so like she did.
Yeah.
Little Witch was.
a
Yeah,
good
that
part of
definitely.
it.
Yeah, that probably helps.
Oh, it does for sure. And then but then there's also the sense of like in terms of the direction, the storyboarding, like there's very much a sense that there's they sure could have inserted some upskirt shots and they never do, thank God.
Yeah.
I watched the first few episodes because again, this is Trigger. They have a bit of a reputation. I watched the first few episodes sort of like this feels very family friendly and just kind of always on guard waiting for that shoe to drop. And it never did. And by the end of it, I was like, I could show this to my 8-year-old cousins.
Yeah.
And that would be awesome.
Yeah, and you would never feel like you would have to explain something.
That just feels so rare in anime too. Just like having a show that you can default to, like, hey, I always get people asking me for recommendations, and sometimes people will be like, hey, I have a 13-year-old or a 10-year-old, and I really want to show them anime. What should I have them watch? I'm just like, and then now I finally have an easy answer. It's just like Little Witch Academia, because it is so pure and just good-hearted and good-spirited too.
Absolutely.
Kind of going back a little bit to what you were saying, Caitlin, about the dark magical girl shift recently. One of the things I really enjoy about the show is, and I don't know if this was intentional or if it's just kind of part of playing within this genre, is that you sort of accidentally will touch on these things. I felt like the series in a way was commenting on that and rejecting it with Croy's whole thing about like collecting negative energy from people to fuel magic and save magic. And it was like that idea of, well, the only way to save this genre is to go dark. And the series completely rejects that and goes the other way and says, no, this genre is powered by, hope and inspiration and believing in yourself and others and friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I never really thought of it in those terms, but that totally makes sense. Like the temptation to say there is power in suffering and sadness and just going sad stuck with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like there's no struggles in Little Witch
that.
Academia. Like there are serious moments, and there are difficulties the characters have to go through, but it's always followed up by that undercurrent of hope and believing in yourself and trying hard, and I think that's really nice to see.
When we talk about like shows being accessible to younger audiences, it's always, I think, worrying to some people because I think that means the themes or the show itself will be diluted to match that audience. And I think that's one of the strengths of the Little Witch Academia is that it isn't like that. Much like Steven Universe, where it's like willing to tackle like these bigger things and sadness and like why maybe using the power of negative energy is not a great thing, or being failed by someone you really admire. And just like a lot more things too about just acceptance of yourself and your personality and learning to be closer to other people that may have rejected you previously. Like there's just so many really great themes in Little Witch Academia, and so like I just want to like reiterate that even though we say this is accessible to younger audiences, that doesn't mean it kind of tones itself down in any way.
Right.
Yeah, I think there are some things that are targeted at kids that are very simplistic, and then there's also I think the best family friendly or kid friendly, however you want to word it, media usually is a lot more sophisticated than people give it credit for, and I think Little Witch Academia absolutely falls in that category, where there's a lot here that someone of any age can enjoy for different reasons, and I really like that about it. There's an entire undercurrent about class and privilege in the education system, which I thought was really great because in high school, and this was a long time ago, so I'm sure the research has changed a bit. But I did a piece on the No Child Left Behind Act and how it was terrible, partly because a lot of the tests are very catered to assuming an audience that is of a higher socioeconomic status, and so like they assume knowledge that you wouldn't necessarily have unless your family had money, basically. And how that, automatically gives certain kids a leg up on these questions that are supposed to be like fair and balanced or whatever. And I liked that Little Witch kind of tackled that with Akko being someone who hadn't come from a witch family, and they were really hostile towards her at first about that. And, so she starts so much further behind everybody else just because she hasn't had the tools that everybody else has had up to that point.
Right.
Right. And everyone's like, oh, you're like, everyone treats her like she's totally useless, but it's just that like she just doesn't have the building blocks.
Right.
Well, then you do kind of find out that she has sort of the magical equivalent of a learning disability.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, Diana had the same situation, but because she did have those tools and that family who knew about magic, she was able to
massively
work on those things before Akko was.
Right,
you know?
like she's able to overcome it because of her resources, where Akko never had that chance.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a little bit unclear. Like, they talk about how magic is sort of disappearing from the world, but it's a little bit unclear, I think, to me, about whether everyone has potential to do magic, or whether it's something that's sort of inborn, like Harry Potter, or if like
No, yeah, I think I understand where you're going with this. It kind of seemed to me like that there are families that have stronger magic, maybe because that's what they've always been practicing and keeping it alive and believing in it. Whereas a lot of people, when they stop believing in magic and stop having that as a practice, then it fades faster.
right, like Lotte's family, like her mom is they're the only magical family in town. Her mom's the only witch in town, but they rely on her magic. Does just no one else in the town have the capacity for magic? Is that just she's the only person in the town who ever learned it, and no one else is really interested in going down that path?
I think it could be a good mix of both, like maybe people having untapped resources that they don't really know about, and also them just losing it over time. I could see that as being a thing that if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing.
Right.
So
It does seem to be this might be a segue into another topic too. It does seem to be something that only women can do. We see these witch families, and presumably they sometimes have boy kids, and they're not involved in the witch school at all. So
Right.
again, I think which I think ties into the magical girl genre. But I also think it gives the show kind of an interesting angle in terms of like the power of femininity, or being a woman. Not even necessarily femininity, because the girls at the school aren't all feminine. Like Amanda's very much kind of a tomboy character.
Right.
And I think there's definitely some fair criticism that could be made for the complete lack of trans people in a show that is kind of trying to talk about again, like female empowerment and like the magic within women, and that sense of, especially the thing I really like about Little Witch is that you do have all these teachers and these older witches who continue to have this magic, because in magical girl shows a lot of the time after adolescence you lose that power.
right.
Right.
So I like that this is a show that says no, you have that, that core uniqueness within you like your whole life, and I thought that was a nice touch. Especially when they are literally fighting the man at moments with the government, who are noticeably all dudes. Like everyone in that room at the end is all men.
Yes.
So I do think the show is trying to make some kind of low key statements about gender and like female empowerment, which
I mean, like, totally
which again,
is.
I think all those conversations can be sort of inherently problematic, or sort of inherently non-inclusive at times, and I think that's a fair criticism of Little Witch.
Yeah, I think you see that especially a lot with anime. Like it's
you
changing,
do.
but not
I mean,
very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dee, are you saying that they believe in magic in a young girl's heart?
yes, that is exactly what I am saying, Caitlin. Thank you.
But do you think the music can free them whenever it starts?
Do you want to just get the whole song out of your system?
No,
here?
that's all I know.
Okay, so we're done. Well, it was a lovely 2 lines. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the other themes of the show, because obviously we have a lot written down, lots to talk about.
Yeah.
We do, yeah. Miranda, I know you wanted to talk about kind of the traditional versus the new magic, and the sort of old ways of thinking and then the newer ways.
Yeah.
Did you want to kind of lead into
So
that?
I think that's kind of a good segue into us talking previously about the difference in magic, and that you can kind of carry that with you no matter what age you are. Obviously, with Little Witch Academia, magic is kind of dying, and there's a big worry about that. And there's one very talented witch who she's now an adult, and she's like, hey, there is a way to fix this. Technology! And it's like the whole idea of like embracing all of this, but she goes like full in. She's like, technology is the key to saving everything. And Kuroshi's like really cool in that, but the way she goes about it too is obviously, in a way, kind of like Akko, of being the only one trying to do something where everyone else is pushing against her. And so like I kind of like that parallel there, and like how it kind of deviates between them two, of course, because Crow, she's like a little antagonistic about it as well. And like I understand why, because she's trying to like push this new innovative thing, and everyone of course said no. And then so she kind of goes off and does her own thing, kind of like Chariot does when Chariot was like, hey, I think we can keep magic alive this other way, which is like celebrating it and making it a fun thing. And they're like, no, you're embarrassing us. And so both of them trying to find their own ways of finding that new thing, whereas the school itself is very traditional. And I think with the younger generation of characters that are actually the stars are like kind of finding out how to do both. And it's just such a great theme to see that struggle, because obviously what Crow, I think it's like Croy? I don't know.
Croy is
Croy?
how they were saying
Okay.
it. I watched the dub because I'm a filthy casual.
Same.
I'm going to say,
No, I put it on and I was like, this just feels like a show that would be on a Saturday morning cartoon slot, so I'm going to watch it in English. And it was a good dub.
yeah,
So.
okay, well, good. So yeah, Croy, I couldn't remember. I had it written down somewhere and I forgot where. Anyway, yeah, so just having her fail with that and then understand what that failure was through this really awful mistake she made, and then them eventually integrating that to be like a more healthy relationship was really interesting, because it's kind of like I look at how schools are now and how they use technology. It's like, hey, even though we have like autocorrect for everything now, like it's so easy to make a mistake and have something fix it for you, like it's still really important to teach spelling. Like you have to know how to spell your words, because there's going to be a time when you don't have those tools and you still have to write everything by hand and you don't want to look like an idiot. So
Right. And and you know, I'm a toddler teacher, and most of the schools I've worked at have been like, you know, no screens, like you don't like put videos on for your kids. But my friend used to work at this school that was like all like they had a smart board. So they had like 2-year-olds sitting down for like trying to make 2-year-olds sit down for 20 minutes to look at this smart board and like playing videos with them. A little bit of technology integration in the classroom isn't bad, especially with older kids. And I mean, a lot of these kids, like they just like go home and they play on iPads all day.
Yeah.
So like, so school is honestly like a time to sort of get away from that for them. But like, you know, this other school is just like, they actively don't want the teachers to lead the kids in like songs and activities that don't involve the smartboard. And it's like, you know, technology can be a useful tool, but like, it's not the end all be all of education. Like,
or the solution to like a dying medium, right? And like, which is kind of
like, don't throw out all the paper notebooks and give everyone laptops to type on, because writing by hand is still like an important skill, and spelling is still an important skill.
Yeah, and then basic magic, and as you see like with Croy's like tablets, they just like cast all the spells for them and like kind of make everything easier. And so I think them hitting on that point in the second half was really, really good and interesting, just because it is such a big struggle. Like even modern day, it's like how much social media is too much, and like where does it end? Like, why don't you guys think for yourselves anymore? And like, you guys aren't actually talking to each other. It's like, well, we are. We're talking to each other more than we ever have, and all these different things. And I think, in addition to all the other themes they tackle, like this one's just a good, interesting point, and seeing how, of course, the younger generation finds that balance.
Yeah, and because that also ties into when I lived in Japan, like. When I did my semester abroad, like 10 years ago, people were already talking then about how like the younger generation is losing their ability to remember and write kanji, because they were all using electric dictionaries to like look up what the kanji was that they needed to write down, and they could still read it, but like they couldn't like generate it because they would just rely on the dictionaries to memorize it instead of like just like sitting down, remembering the kanji, writing out drills, etc., etc.
Yeah, so it's a cool theme that I liked a lot in it as well.
Well, and kind of as you pointed out, Croy and Akko are both sort of trying to do new things. You know, Akko is this kind of upstart who shows up out of nowhere and has these different ideas about what she wants magic to do that are inspired by Shiny Chariot, and that's not how things are done. And so I like that the show isn't complete. It's not like the show is completely anti-progress. It's very much like, no, you do need to find new ways forward so that these traditions and these things that are important can continue to exist. But it's also very careful about, but there is a right way to go about it, and, exploiting people's negative emotions, maybe not the right way there, Croy. So I think Croy's a really good antagonist because she's very sympathetic.
Yeah, like she's just trying to better themselves and like further. It's like, hey, why are we ignoring this massive resource that the rest of the world has? Like maybe that's why magic is dying. And I think her heart's in a good place mostly, but because she's kind of spurred by vengeance, obviously it goes very wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and they kind of, like, at the end she realizes she's wrong and she kind of goes out to try to take care of her mistakes. And so I like that the show gave her that ending, because when she showed up, I was like, she has the coolest character design I've ever seen.
Yes.
And then I was like, oh God, please don't be a bad guy. And then she was a bad guy. I was like, damn it. So I was glad that they kept her.
She's got all those straps on her costume.
Yeah, and that cool cape and the swoopy hair, and I just really liked her character design. So.
She's
She
very
stands
unique.
on the little robot to fly instead of flying because she lost her ability.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, and her friendship with Ursula was, it was just, I thought they handled that really well, to kind of allow that balance to exist there.
And this is a little bit of a branching off of what we were just talking about, but one kind of cool detail I noticed was that a lot of different families seem to have their own magic traditions. Like, lattes is very much about like the magic within thing and like a sort of animism.
Yeah.
Like Lottes is based on animism, and Susie's all about the poison and the potions. And like, Diana is English, and presumably Luna Nova is in England. Certainly seems to be the case, and she's like very much like, she sort of excels in sort of all of the traditions that the school has, because like she is that is her magical cultural background. So Akko comes in without any sort of magical traditions of her own, and she just sort of has to like come up with her own way of doing things.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's inspired by Shiny Chariot, so she kind of has her own school, but it's not anything that's been established over time.
Right, it's like something she adopted, and it's not what people want her to adopt either. It's like that goofiness of like being an entertainer and sharing the joy of magic with everybody.
Yeah, but kind of tying into what you were saying, Caitlin, I think the show does a pretty good job of giving you a lot of different kinds of students at the academy with like different personalities and ways of doing things, and it for the most part, this might be the one place where I give the show some criticism. For the most part, I think it doesn't really like judge or mock them for having different ways of going about things. I mean, you talked about Lotte and Susie, who are Akko's closest friends, and so obviously they play a big role in the show. But then like Amanda gets that great episode where they infiltrate the boys' school and she kicks everyone's ass. Amanda's
really good.
Amanda's really fun. I really liked the Constance episode. I think I've definitely seen some folks online read Constance as both a mute character or as a nonverbal autistic, and I can't speak to that personally. So I mean, folks in the comments, please do let us know if you relate to her in that aspect. But I have seen people talk about that. But I like that she is definitely a nonverbal character, however you want to read that. And the show does a really nice, positive job of not making her out to be like, some kind of weirdo, or why can't you just talk normal? Like the other students work with her with that, and Akko's very, very kind of overly friendly, I think, in a way that kind of annoys Constance at first, but then they come to kind of appreciate each other's strengths, and I like that a lot about them too.
Well, isn't that how Akko is with everyone? She kind of annoys them at first.
Yeah. I think the two places that I wish Little Witch had done a better, well, I mentioned the lack of trans characters obviously is a bummer. I think we have that really good, what I think her name's Wagneri maybe? She's the brown student who's like their announcer, and she's got that wild orange hair, and she seems so cool.
Yeah.
and we never really get anything with her other than that she's sort of just like the school's announcer.
Right.
For all
For
their
it being
events.
set in England, it's a little disappointing that there's not a little bit more diversity in their students. Like, there's a lot of background students that are diverse, but none that actually have like good speaking parts aside from one guy.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
and I've noticed that one thing that it's very interesting about anime is they tend to be better about remembering to populate the crowd scenes with people of diverse colors more so than American shows are a lot of the time. It's like they go, well, yeah, this is set in America and there's lots of different people in America, so of course the background will have lots of black and brown folks in it as in addition to white people. But at the same time, you don't necessarily see that many characters taking a starring role, which is unfortunate. 'Cause the same thing with I've been reading The Promised Neverland, and it also takes place in this kind of diverse population, and there's a lot of the little kids who are people of color, but the main cast is predominantly white, so that's kind of unfortunate.
Well, I mean,
and then the other thing is, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Susie is Filipino.
She is?
Yeah.
So
I did not know
I'm
that.
actually on the wiki, and it's interesting seeing like what officially has been confirmed. So like Wangari is from Kenya, and I'm trying to see what else they have. She's Filipino. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is neat. Yeah, and that is one thing I always have to be kind of careful about and we've rightfully been criticized for this, is we'll talk about a lack of people of color or characters of color in anime. And I mean, technically every Japanese character is a character of color.
Right.
So a lot of the time when I say that, I mean more outside of Japan or outside of
Right, especially when it's set in a location where it allows itself to have a more diverse cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like most of the characters have like canon nationalities. So like Akko is Japanese, of course.
Yeah.
Susie is Filipino. Lotte is Finnish. You can tell because there's Moomin references in her episodes.
Cute.
And then like, I think other than what's her name? The announcer character? Wangari. She's Kenyan, and then the rest are, I think, just various European countries. Yasminka is Russian.
Yeah.
So like most of them do have like canon ethnicities, and so I mean of the main three, like 2 of them are Asian. I think that was really cool because I remember people getting really excited that there was a Filipino main character.
I had not realized that at all. So that's awesome. Yeah, I hadn't caught that with her name. I think I heard Susie and just figured, oh, she's also from Europe.
Yeah.
But that's good to know. I had not realized that. I still think that a show set in England could have more black and brown folks, but I do think
agree.
That is good, and I don't want to downplay the fact that there's a Filipino character in the main trio for sure. I think that's great. And then the other area that I think my biggest kind of groan with Little Witch is Yasmina, because the characters don't mock her. Like they're all very like nice and she's part of the group, but at the same time she is solely defined by eating, and she is the slightly chubby character. So that's an ongoing issue with anime that I feel like we should at least mention because it's not great.
Every single time it's just like what if you don't do that though? Like, that'd be cool.
Can we not?
Well, and because they do such a good job with all the other characters of giving them, these multi-layered personalities, and so her only thing being that she likes food is really is more noticeable and obnoxious, I would say. But overall, they're good classmates, which is maybe a good place to move into some of the other students. Before we'll probably spend a lot of time with Diana and Akko and Shiny Chariot here at the end. So before we get into that, I did kind of want to. We haven't mentioned Andrew at all, and I really like Andrew, so I'm curious as to how you guys feel about Andrew.
Yeah, I like him a whole bunch. Like he's a good skeptic that kind of warms up to him and is obviously working to also like defy his father because his father is garbage, but
Yeah, I really liked him I loved his arc in the story because I think he ends up being a really good example of a good ally, because again, with the witches all being women, And then the folks in government all being men. There's definitely, again, an undercurrent of gender commentary going on here. And so Andrew sort of starting off as kind of just a parrot to his father, and then realizing, and then, through his interactions with Akko and Diana, which, thank God, I mean, I think there's some good ships in the series, and we can definitely talk about that. But I'm really glad the show doesn't really have an actual, like, explicit romance, because I think that Andrew, like, being changed for love is shitty and kind of cheap, and so I like that it's really just he is inspired by them and sees what they can do, and is
right,
and appreciates and comes to respect them because of that. And then my favorite thing is in that last episode when the government, when the man is trying to like shoot down the rocket, and they're going to screw up everything, and again, this is the dub, so the subtitle script might be a little bit different, but he basically says like, no, what we need to do here is get out of their way and support them. And I was like, yes, Andrew, you are a good ally. Well done. So I really appreciated his role in the story at the end, and kind of the way it I think it did a really good job of showing like how boys can support women, and it doesn't have to be about like, coming to their rescue. It can just be like, believing in them when they tell you something.
It's like also just being a friend. Like obviously him and Akko had like a weird relationship to start with, and like everyone's like, oh my gosh, Andrew's so handsome, which he is, but like them coming around, it's like, hey, you can have a friend that's like conventionally attractive and be friends.
Yeah, sure.
And that's fine.
I remember, like, before I watched the show, seeing the discussion online, everyone was really down on Andrew. Like, they were just kind of calling him boring a lot of times.
Aw, I like him though.
I think his arc is really important too. Like the first few times you see him, it's just like, okay, like you're fine. And then as he grows and like goes on to support Akko and all the witches at Luna Nova, I think he becomes a lot more interesting that way.
Right.
As he kind of finds himself like, too. Well, maybe that's the thing, is he is boring because he just does what he's told. Like that was his whole life, was like, I just do what my father needs me to do because I have to take his place eventually. And like that was his whole point. And then growing out of that made him so much more interesting as he found his own self.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he's kind of boring because like he's not meant to sort of have this spotlight at any point. He's supposed to be a support character. But also like I think a lot of it is sort of the antagonism, like, oh, he's a decent person, like, what, does he want a cookie? But I think it's important to have narratives of people, like, who realize that they were wrong and that they were jerks, and, like, even if the person who, like, even if everyone's not, like, totally nice to him about it, like, he learns that, like, he was being crappy before, because that arc is really important, and I think that like it's important to have people who are supportive allies from the start in fiction, but like seeing the personal growth like mapped out.
Well, and I think the show, again, I think if you're going to have a show that is kind of about like women in positions of power and being treated with respect, which is I think a lot of kind of what Little Witch is sort of hinting at with the witches and again the government not seeing a purpose for them, is you need to have the conversation about the other side of that, and the some of the toxic masculinity that Andrew's dealing with his father kind of forcing all these expectations on him and doing things exactly the same way Dad did, and going, no, that we can do it differently, and we're going to.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's really good that because a lot of the time you get these stories about like all girls schools, and it's like boys just don't exist in this world. They are nowhere. So I'm glad that Little Witch acknowledged that no, there are men, there are boys in this world, and this is how they can have a place in this and make that how feminism affects everyone positively.
Yeah.
Because I think Andrew's a lot happier by the end of the story.
Yeah.
I think also a lot of times with these all girl schools or all girl environments, sometimes you'll also see just one man in charge leading everything, and that makes things awkward as well.
Yeah.
And I think this does a good job of saying like, well, obviously there's political differences here, and they're very important, and like showing the difference there and like why things weren't working well. It's really important.
Yeah. We hate magic. Why? I don't know.
Because
we just do.
It's old. I don't know.
Because women.
Yeah, because women. Yeah, so he's a good boy.
I like
Yeah.
him. I don't know. I avoid fandom drama, so I don't know if there's like love triangle nonsense with him and Diana and Akko. But we may as well talk about Diana now as another character who kind of functions as part of that sort of
Personal growth.
yeah, the person, and then I was kind of thinking in terms of that kind of main triangle of the kids who were sort of trying to move society forward. I think it's Andrew, Akko, and Diana.
Yes.
And the way they kind of team up and join together in different ways at the end, and the conclusions they come to are all really important. I really love that the anime sort of subverts that concept of Diana as the kind of bitchy, shallow, stuck-up rival. Like, Akko perceives her that way early on, but Diana's really never like snubbing her nose at Akko. It's more that she's annoyed at the way she feels like Akko isn't taking things seriously.
Yeah, and I think with as much focus as Diana has and like her responsibility to her house is such a big thing, and to see someone like Akko come in like just like, oh, magic, yeah, I'm gonna learn it, I'm gonna be great, and then she's like, why are you like this? Like kind of like disrespectful almost too, and I understand that, and like her perspective of that. Diana also had to work so hard to get back to where she was, and so I could see her being a little offended by Akko's behavior at the beginning.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it's nice because the show doesn't feel the need to just sort of throw Diana in as an antagonist just sort of whenever. Like we go whole episodes without seeing her because like, you know, it could easily have been like, oh, Akko wants to do a thing, but that thing is not how she's supposed to do it, and Diana comes in and is also like, ha, 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 this is how we do it, and then everyone fawns over her. But like they managed to, like, they didn't make that part of the formula for the episodes, which is good. And it's also because, you know, one of the things I like about their dynamic early on is that while Akko has decided that Diana is her rival, Diana honestly does not like think too much about Akko, it seems like.
Yeah, I think
that's very true.
It's not really
like,
revealed until the end, like that she was concerned for Akko because they came from such similar places of like lacking something with magic, but also like you said, tries not to concern herself too much too because she has her own stuff to do.
Like Akko like annoys her sometimes, but like most of the time Diana is just doing her own thing while Akko's getting into these misadventures. And I think that's interesting because, like, yeah, the end is revealed that, like, yeah, she was concerned about Akko, but when she says, like, I never thought of you as my rival, like, it's supposed to be like, oh, she just doesn't think of her, and you know, it turns out that's not the case. But like, either way, like, if she's not thinking of Akko as her rival, then she's not going to like come along and insinuate herself every time that Akko is getting up to something.
Yeah, Diana has her own concerns. She's not by any stretch obsessed with Akko. But then watching their relationship develop in the second half of the series was so great. They're very good together. And again, I like that Little Witch Academia is not a show that really has any explicit romances, because I think those stories of mutual respect and inspiration between that kind of central trio of people who are going to be pushing this world forward. I think that hits harder if it's not just about, like, you know, impressing the person you like. But at the same time, they are a very good ship, and I totally get why people are behind them.
There's like definitely hints there too that there could be romance between them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm not to say that like people, I can definitely see it, but I like that. I think it is important that in a show about inspiring change in others, that you downplay that, well, it's because I'm in love with the aspect, because I think that kind of
honestly
cheapens
like
it.
really refreshing not to have a focus on romance like at all, like just completely absent of it. Like there's like maybe flirting and some like ideas of it, but it never becomes a focal point. It's not about that. It's about these characters learning to grow and better their world.
Yeah, and these two very different but also very similar people, because Diana was also inspired by Shiny Chariot, you learn, and then kind of had that sort of tamped down over time. And so the two of them, you know, finding these areas of common ground, and then also using their differences to team up and save the day at the end. The finale with the two of them.
Oh,
God, that was
so
such
sweet.
a good.
Oh, so
I was
good.
like sobbing.
It's
So
beautiful.
beautiful.
You and I.
Yeah, that was it's a very good emotional climax. And that kind of brings us to the conclusion. We are coming up on the hour here. We
Wow,
haven't
it
talked
flew
a ton
by.
about Ursula and her relationship with Akko. Otherwise, I think we've covered a lot of the main points. Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about here at the end?
I mean, I'd be happy to talk about Ursula. I like Ursula a lot.
Yeah, we should. Then we should. Let's get into her and her relationship with Akko and that kind of hero role that shifts into a more grounded mentorship role, which I really like that idea of like an idol is someone you can sort of pursue from a distance, but a mentor is someone who can actually, teach you and help you learn the specific things you need to know to achieve those goals. So. And something you mentioned earlier, Miranda, was the idea of your heroes will let you down.
Yes. Oh man,
Yeah.
it's such a sweet relationship, but it's also so sad that when you find out like why Akko has such a hard time learning. And it sucks because, it wasn't intentional, right? It was like kind of a thing that Ursula, when she was Chariot, was kind of like conned into almost. And so to not speak so vaguely about it, like, because Akko lost part of her powers because of Shiny Chariot's like grand performance, which actually stole the magic from the children that were watching the show. And I mean, she had no idea. And then kind of seeing her go undercover and just kind of go back to being Ursula as opposed to being Chariot, and mentoring these students and trying to find any way to give back is like such a noble thing. And it's kind of sad because you see her pushing so hard because she feels so guilty about it. But it's like kind of great to see her also learn how to overcome that guilt and be better for the students that she failed.
Yeah, no, I mean, like as a teacher myself, I love Ursula. I think she is. I mean, just on a personal level, I love that she is a teacher, but she is and a mentor, but she is also a hot mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she sees a lot of. I mean, it's not just like the guilt she feels over Akko losing part of her powers because of her, but also like she sees a lot of herself in Akko. Like there's a lot of parallels between the characters. Like Ursula is, very sweet, and she really, really, really wants to do right by her students, but she's kind of a mess of a teacher. She's not a bad teacher, but she's just like kind of struggling to stay on top of things a lot of the time,
and
which I relate to.
I mean, it's her first year, so she's definitely getting her feet. I think by the end, as the series progresses, she becomes a better and better kind of mentor figure for Akko, which I really liked at the end when Akko kind of confronts her about the stuff with Shiny Chariot and is like, you know what, I want you to keep being my teacher. I like you. I like what you've done for me. You don't need to be like this, untouchable idol figure anymore. We can keep working together in this kind of more real relationship.
So one thing I really about that too is that they train that, hey, when you have an idol or like you really admire somebody, like your hero, they're flawed, and it's really important to recognize and understand that those people are flawed too, and that you can't hold yourself up to like what imaginary ideals you've set for them, and it's also unfair to them to believe that they aren't aren't without flaws as well. And so
and once you learn those flaws and you learn that who they are as human, it's not you can be disappointed, but at the same time it doesn't have to like ruin your relationship. It changes your relationship. But like Akko idolized Chariot, and she learns that like Ursula takes an interest in her because she knows this, but I don't know if Akko really saw Ursula at the same level as like a mentor as Ursula wanted to. And then like once Akko learns like the whole truth about Ursula and Chariot and the magic show, there's this period of anger, but then like she can sort of put things together into the whole picture of like, this is her idol, but this is also her teacher, and this, she hurt her, but she also helped her, she also inspired her, and it's a more complete vision of her as a person, but it doesn't ruin her respect for her. It just makes it so that they can relate better on a more human level, which I really love about like their relationship.
Yeah, I think that was very well put.
I also like that it's very obvious who Ursula is. Like the show doesn't skirt around it. They're like, yeah, and then they use that to their advantage in certain narrative beats too, which I like.
Oh, the dramatic irony.
It's like, Akko, we know who it is. No, we know where she is. She's real pretty.
Yeah, no. I really love Ursula, like, because like teaching is fucking hard, man. And my first year as a lead teacher was not a complete disaster, but pretty close. So like there was a lot of very relatable teacher feelings going on for me there. So yeah, she's really just really great. I want to make a cosplay of her.
Yeah.
But she's very good.
Yeah, I agree. I have nothing else to add.
Well, I think
you hit all the points there.
We're kind of wrapping it up here. I don't know, I think Little Witch Academia has a solid cast of characters, and they all have very interesting lessons to learn throughout the show. And especially with the first half, it gets so much about the main trio, and then the second starts expanding more and more into the other students, and obviously kind of has a core antagonist in like a really good way. And it's just nice to see how it evolves.
Yeah, although it's just not... I would like more Lotte and Susie in the second half. They kind of got left by the wayside, which was a bummer. Yeah.
Gosh, like their standalone episodes are so good. Like Lotte and talking about internet trolls. It's so good.
Oh God, everything with the Nightfall series. That was the moment I knew the show was a kid. I was like, okay, this is wonderful. That whole episode was great.
Yeah,
so.
Don't be ashamed for your young adult literature. It's so good.
And I was actually really touched by Susie's episode where it's like, she is sort of rejecting these, like, this is who I could be, but this is not who I am. Like, what if I wore mascara? Gone. Nope, not who I am. And just like sort of the infinite possibilities, like within teenage girls, and like, I mean, and all teenagers in general, but you know, teenage girls, and sort of like necessity, and but also like the kind of sadness of having to sort of prune who you are so that like you are a coherent person and you're not trying to do too much and be too many people, but you know, you are rejecting sincere desires that you have, because I can definitely see my teenage self in a lot of that.
And she wants to read the Nightfall books, but she also does not want to be seen with them, so you know.
The eternal struggle. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other final thoughts here? Again, we are at the hour now, so I think this is one of those shows where we could probably like go through every one of the episodic episodes and talk about some story beat or character moment that resonated or meant, you know, something awesome. It's a really good show. I think again, I love how family friendly it is. I love that undercurrent of optimism and hope. I love that I don't really feel like there's any caveats other than, again, I think Yasmina is a bit of a wince, but otherwise it's just a nice show about nice kids, and I love the way it kind of all comes together.
Yeah, you know, like I think your descriptor of Trigger without the bullshit is really accurate, because you know, I love the energy that Trigger has, but most of the time, like, it's really hard to like sort of get past like a lot of the fan service and Imaishi's forced transformation thing, because that's definitely something that he is into, I feel like, and it's kind of grody. But like, you know, having that just that energy and that passion, and that flair and that style, like all of it, and then just like not having to deal with just tits in your face all the time. It's just like it really is just something special. It's really, I hope Trigger makes more series like this.
God, me too.
Because I feel like some of the series where Trigger was like, okay, we're gonna do something different, kind of failed. I think anime fandom has collectively, rightfully forgotten that when supernatural battles become commonplace existed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some...
Or like that it was a trigger.
Yeah. It's kind of one of the few things that they've done when it was like an adapted work, right? Because they try to do their own original stuff. So I really do hope that they give Yoshinari a chance to direct something again and kind of lead another project.
Yeah.
But I think they probably will. Like, obviously, with the success of Little Witch Academia, like, I don't think that they would want to shy away from that.
But yeah, like, sort of, I think when they've tried to branch out and do something different, it's sort of lost like what makes Trigger Trigger, but this brings like that Trigger style, what everyone loves about Trigger, and none of the stuff that people hate about Trigger. And I think they should embrace it. They should do more of it, and they can be horny sometimes, but not all the time. Horniness is a sometimes food.
Well, and one thing I will say in Trigger's defense is I don't know if you ever watched Space Patrol Luluco, Caitlin.
I did. I love Space Patrol Luluco.
I enjoyed that one because I thought that was one time when Trigger did a pretty good job of because so much of their horny stuff is just so one-sided. That it gets very exhausting and feels like they're playing into a lot of gendered stereotypes. So I liked that Luluco was this really thirsty kid who had this crush on this guy who was very, very boring. It was nothing going on really, but it was. I thought that was a fun show, and it had a little bit of the Trigger bullshit in it. But it was another one where I went, you guys can be very inclusive and fun and inventive, and I just do more of that, please.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. The Luluco thing just had like the forced transformation where I like, Imaishi, you're enjoying this a little too much. Aren't you forcing this teenage girl to turn into a gun when she doesn't want to?
I did see some women and girls on Twitter talk about how that really resonated with them, though, in terms of like the awkwardness of puberty and having things like change or like suddenly getting your period in class and things like that. So I know there were, and while I totally see where you're coming from, Caitlin, I do think that there were elements of that also resonated in that particular context. So again, it was another, just if there are folks out there who like Little Witch and they're, I would not show Space Patrol Luluco to your 8-year-olds, which I would show Little Witch to your 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it is more kind of in line with that Trigger style with a little bit more, what's the word? I don't know. A little less bullshit, I guess. I guess I'll just keep coming back to without the bullshit. So. Okay. If you guys are happy with that, go watch Little Witch Academia, I guess is where we're all sort of
I kind of hope if you've already watched it, because we did get on some spoilery things, but if you haven't,
that is true.
It's still worth watching.
If you somehow got through this whole thing, show it to your friends and family. It's a good show.
But this is definitely a show that like is really easy to enjoy even with spoilers.
Yeah, I had so many spoilers
That's
because
true.
it was out in Japan obviously before Netflix, so that's so infuriating. But story for another day.
But it's a good one for sure. Okay, yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and wrap us up then, since we are all finished up, getting our good witch feelings out of the way. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Chatty AF. If you like what you heard, you can find more of our work at www.animefeminist.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at AnimeFeminist, on Facebook at AnimeFem, and on Tumblr at AnimeFeminist. And if you want to help us produce more of these neato podcasts and the articles that we publish on our website, you can help us out by going to www.patreon.com/animefeminist and becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month. We really do push those small donations. They really do go a long way altogether to help us create more, to do more with the site. We have lots of projects we really want to work on, and we do need the funding for them because it is a big part of our goal is to make sure that everyone is paid fairly for their work. So again, that's www.patreon.com/animefeminist, and we'd really appreciate that. Okay, thanks again for listening. Go forth and make some magic happen.
It's friendship.
The source of your magic is a believing heart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, believing. What is it? Believing in yourself is your own magic. Twinkle.